Hi, everybody. I'm Regenda Roy, the Chief Curator of Film here at the Museum of Modern Art. It's such a pleasure to welcome you to this special contender screening of The Five Bloods and the Q&A with director Spike Lee and star Delroy Lindo. Thank you, gentlemen, both for joining us. I want to thank Chanel, our year-round sponsor, for all things film at MoMA, and all of you, our members, for joining us for this Q&A. Gentlemen, congratulations. I'm sure it's been a year, quite a year, and I was
that's not even including the film.
I mean, let's focus on the film because all the rest of it is a lot. But it's actually impossible not to address the context in which this film has existed for the public. You know, I know you've been living with it for a while, even before we all saw it. But I was thinking back to when, I mean, this was kind of the first major film to be released out of the pandemic, and it kind of arrived right at the real reckoning of social justice, racial justice that was emerging, the consciousness around it after the murder of George Floyd. And I went back and I looked, and the title of the New York Times review that Tony Scott wrote, and I know he didn't probably write the title of the review headline, but it was "Black Lives Mattered in Vietnam Too." And I just thought that was I mean, like, okay, I get it, you know, current events, but the gut punch for me of BLM, of Black Lives Matter, as a name for a movement, for an organization, it's stating something that should be obviously true, but has not been true in America. And what your film pointed out to me was, like other things, part of America's cultural export has been racism. And that was a gut punch to me.
Imported too.
Imported too. No, I mean, truly. But maybe if you could just talk a little bit about.
Excuse me. Why was it a gut punch to you? Because it was not something you were previously aware of. Why was it a gut punch for you?
That the true nature of exporting our racism. Yeah, for me that was a gut punch. I mean, my father was an immigrant, so I knew about people escaping their situation, coming to America, and then facing racism. I really hadn't processed or thought about America taking its own traditions of racism and sending them abroad, sending them back out into the world.
So I fought in World War I and World War II.
Yeah,
and Korea.
I mean, and so if me, as son of an immigrant, that would maybe talk a little bit about like putting that out. I mean, you've never shied away from holding that mirror up, Spike, but like, I don't know. That was just my first thought, especially when I reread that headline.
Well, thank you for having us, and it's always good to see my brother, Mr. Lindo.
Likewise.
This script came to me from the producer Lloyd Levin. At the time, I was getting ready to do Black Klansman, and I was intrigued by the script. And my co-writer, Kevin Wilmot, we worked together on Black Klansman. We said, let's take a crack at it. But we were very intrigued because we had grown up watching numerous Vietnam films where the Bloods were not there.
Yeah.
And then I'm not here to blast anybody, you know, but we just wanted to, as Bugging Out said, and do the right thing, put some brothers on that Vietnam wall. And that was it. You know, we were there, we were dying, you know, and I touched upon it already with my World War II film, Miracle St. Anna. So it comes down to a basic truth that, which we alluded to in The Five Bloods. We've been dying from this country, the United States of America, from the get-go. The first person to die for this country was a Black man. His name was Crispus Attucks. Died for the red, white, and blue. The Boston Massacre. So we've been dying for a country from the get-go. Does not love us back.
You know, Raj, is that what you called Raj?
Thank you. Perfect.
Raj. What occurs to me in terms of the release of the film and the film being released when it was released, there was this kind of sublime and unfortunate synchronicity. The film landed in the middle of this zeitgeist. The zeitgeist fed the power of the film, and the power of the film fed directly into the zeitgeist. And I guess additionally, it speaks to, even though we had no way of knowing, Spike had no way of knowing that the George Floyd event would happen. But it is, as far as I'm concerned, as far as being a participant in the film, it is indicative of, on some level, and speaks to, on some level, Spike's creative journey, and the fact that because he chooses to tell the stories in the way that he tells them, he's directly punching into the zeitgeist. With the release of the Five Bloods, the whole thing was just accentuated that much more because of the circumstances of George Floyd and what that in turn ignited, not only in this country, but globally.
Truly.
If I could piggyback on my brother,
Please.
before George Floyd,
Amen.
there was Errol
Amen.
Garner and many more before, but there was Ray Raheem.
Yes.
Do the right thing. I wrote that in 88, came out 89.
Right.
So it was and Delroy, you hit upon it. Things converged.
That's right.
Things converged.
Moving the film to the context of cinema history, I mean, it enters now the pantheon of great quest films, whether that's, you know, and in the sense that all great quest films for me involve both a search for something and some knowledge, right? And so whether it's Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which people have talked about, or Rashomon, or Apocalypse Now, which also people have talked about.
You just named three of my favorite films. I may interject.
Please.
The premise for She's Gonna Have My first film is Rashomon, which I saw at NYU. I was introduced to world cinema in NYU grad film school. I never heard of Kurosawa. Treasure Sierra Madre, the original script, which we were given for the Five Bloods, that was a different title, but he has a large part of Treasure Sierra Madre in that.
Yeah.
And Apocalypse Now, Francis Ford, that's my guy, you know. And we have several homages to Apocalypse Now. You named three right there.
Well, I'm glad I passed that test at least. But I mean, look.
Wasn't a test.
Yeah. No, but you know what? Also, there's a towering figure in each of those films, whether it's Bogart or Mifune or Brando, and Mr. Lindo. Clearly, you have also entered that pantheon.
Pantheon.
No, I mean,
I'm echoing.
Well,
I'm co-signing.
Look, these guys were both powerful and incredibly burdened. And, you know, I mean, obviously I want to talk, I would love to hear from you about where you went to find him and to bring him to life, and the layered burdens that this gentleman has, up until the very, very, very present one of being a MAGA, right? And wearing that hat and owning that relationship to a populist movement in this country that in many ways would reject him, and the conflict inherent there. So, you know, just as far as you would like to go in helping us understand how you found this incredible, towering figure.
You dropped out toward the end there and the screen froze, but I think your question essentially is, where did I go to and how did I find Paul? How did I discover Paul?
Correct.
All right. What's occurring to me in response, it's everything. It's exactly the reason that I went to acting school. And, you know, almost 40 years plus ago, I came out of a tradition. Well, I was on the tail end of a tradition of theater actors in New York, but probably across the country or maybe the world, that thought that theater could change the world. I kind of was on the tail end of that. And while I've modified that, maybe theater can't change the world per se, but to be involved with work such as this film that creates a shift in people's perceptions or their responses. So to answer your question, and the reason I reference acting school is because on some level, as I'm sitting here thinking now, maybe on some level, my whole career prepared me to do this work. Now, I am not saying that I wanted to wait 25 years to get a part like Paul. I'm not saying that, but.
And that's how long that's long, the amount of years between you work lasts, right?
Well, look, the circumstances were what they were. So to answer your question, and this is a retrospective response, I was ready. I was ready, in as much as from the beginning, I recognized this part as a huge, tragic, Shakespearean, Wilsonian part, a classic part. I recognized that from the jump, from the beginning. The fact, the MAGA component, even though it's been well documented that I push back against that, but when I think about the MAGA component, also in retrospect, the fact that that is anathema to me as a person also contributed an incredibly dramatic component. Because what is the basis of drama? It's conflict. And that was a major conflict. Major conflict to me as a person and everything that I want to believe I stand for, and what Paul stands for. So it compelled me almost immediately to start delving into the areas of this man's conflicts, various conflicts. Now, as I uncovered, and this was throughout the process of the film, but as I uncovered or got some kind of a understanding of what the basis of Paul's conflicts were, and the major conflict, the MAGA conflict, completely opposite to me, it compelled me to investigate at a level that ultimately produced the work that you saw in the film. It's exactly why I went to acting school.
Wow.
And
where'd you go?
The film jumped to the extent that the film landed in the middle of the zeitgeist, and I think we all agree on that point. It stands the chance, it presents the opportunity, if not to change the world, certainly to impact how people think, how audiences think about these men, Paul, and the extent to which Paul, I am disaffected and disconnected from myself. And that is the basis of my journey, trying to reconnect from all of my pain, all of my anxiety, all of my angst, all of my neuroses, all of my insanity, and trying to make sense of all of that. And that's the basis of Paul's journey throughout this film.
Powerful.
Where'd you go to school?
ACT, the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco.
The
Yeah.
Bay.
Huh?
The Bay.
The Bay. Did I answer your question, Raj?
You went way beyond it. No, I mean, look,
All right.
I think, you know, that you're reiterating this film's connection to the zeitgeist keep progressing, because in, you know, addressing the fact that how many Asian Americans, how many Latinos, how many Black men, especially, went MAGA even in this election, right?
Amen.
Like, we
I want to say something.
reckoning. We still have a reckoning with gentlemen like Paul who, for whatever reason, are still going that direction despite what it represents for them.
When you talk about reckoning, either I heard you say this, Spike, or I read it. I'm not sure what the source was. But
I'm listening.
But I seem to recall, Do the Right Thing. I read, or you said that you got some fever for the Radio Raheem murder. Yeah. And the fact that there were certain people who didn't believe, they thought that was over the top. They didn't believe that kind of thing could happen, right? So here it is, all these years later, and we are in the maelstrom. We're in, again, the zeitgeist, these zeitgeisty moments that involve the murders of all these Black men and Black women at the hands of police force. And again, when you talk about a reckoning, Raj, you know, I think that there are probably a lot of people who are reimagining, having a reckoning with that component of American culture, that component of American racism and violence that Spike touched on all those years ago in Do the Right Thing. And fast forwarding, we now have to reckon with the fact that there are a certain percentage of Black and brown, probably men, who are Trump supporters.
More than a
we have to reckon with, as a culture, as a nation, we have to reckon with what in the world is that about? Yeah. What is the basis of that?
Well, I like to jump in. My late mother always used to say, Spiky, Black folks are not a monolithic group. So,
amen.
You know, so that's something to think about. But I want to piggyback on what my brother Delroy just said. When you talking about the people who had problems or issues with the murder, the infamous chokehold.
And the chokehold specifically, right? That's right.
NYPD chokehold. But we've seen this, people around the world, and not just Black people, have took to the streets, kneeling, chanting Black Lives Matter. So that, I mean, that's the big difference. I mean, people took to the streets.
And what does it mean? And what does it mean when you talk about Black Lives Matter? What does it mean that as recently as last weekend, this group, and I don't want to say their name, this group of white men saw fit to go onto the property of a Black church, and not just any Black church, the church where Frederick Douglass, there's a connection with Frederick Douglass on that church. There's a connection with Gwen Ifill, the great journalist. And they saw fit to go onto that property and deface the Black Lives Matter signage that was on that property. Not their property.
Yeah.
So the violations, there are violations on top of violations on top of violations that when you speak, Raj, about these moments of reckoning, that we still right now today have to reckon with. And one last thing I'll say, you know, I just got back, I was out of town. I just got back on Sunday, and I see in my home a copy of Vanity Fair from maybe a couple of months ago. And on the front cover of Vanity Fair is a rendering of Breonna Taylor. And the first thing that I thought about is, and this goes again, Raj, to the question or the concept of reckoning. And I thought to myself, what does it mean that the only way that this young lady could get on the front cover of Vanity Fair is to be murdered.
In her bed.
In her bed, in her home. What does it mean? That they're the circumstances under which this young lady makes the front cover of Vanity Fair.
Truly.
And I think it's fair to say that under any other circumstances, she would never in a trillion years have made the front cover of Vanity Fair. But in her death, she makes the front cover. So there, when you speak, Raj, about reckoning, and I'm agreeing with what you're saying, we have a whole lot to reckon with.
Absolutely.
On many levels, this film continues to be at the center. This film, The Five Bloods, continues to be at the center of whatever that paradigm, whatever that journey is and will continue to be. And that is why it enters, you know, the pantheon, to use your word, Raj, of work, American film.
Yeah, about the great American struggle. Look, before we move on to my next topic, I do have to give a shout out for the importance of theater, and specifically in relationship to Spike, your other film this year, David Byrne's American Utopia, which makes so crystal clear how critical the theater is still to this community. And I don't know if you've seen George C. Wolfe's adaptation of Wilson's Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, but it's incredible. So, look, I also want to address this notion of the idealized and disappeared, and that comes in the form of the character of Norman, played by Chadwick Boseman, and again, an unanticipated and unbelievable parallel that has emerged in terms of a young man, an incredible talent who played this essential character in your film, who was in the script and in the way he was portrayed, this idealized figure with all this mythology built around. Yeah. So maybe if you could just talk a little bit about the mythologies that Chadwick Boseman was able to imbue in this character that he was in fact living himself in a way.
Well, you know, I did not know he was sick. Ryan Coogler didn't know he was sick. George C. Wolfe didn't know he was sick. Chadwick chose not to tell anyone, probably because he didn't want pity, because he knew that if we had known, we would have taken it easy. And if I had known, I would not have had him running like using Bolt in the jungle during battle sequences. So understand. But when you think about mythic, the script is written mythic. So think of the roles: Jackie Robinson, James Brown, Thurgood Marshall, Black Panther. So what else I need, you know? Come on.
Truly. Yeah.
So I've had to you know, just watching, you know, his is a mythic character, and they talk about him. The lines in the script refer to him as a mythic soldier, someone who kept him alive, someone gave him inspiration, courage, and someone who's literally their blood brother. You know, in the jungle, you know, you look to your right, look to your left, you know, that's all you got. You know, you got to protect each other. And so when he was killed, you know, it tore everybody apart, especially Paul's character with the friendly fire. But one of the scenes I know I've been doing a lot of interviews, but the scene on this film, but the scene I keep referring back to is a scene between my man right there, Delroy, and Chadwick as Stormer Norman when he comes back as a ghost or a vision in Paul's mind. And I'm not trying to like brag or nothing like that, but I can't think of a scene. And ladies and gentlemen, please excuse me if you disagree. We just see two black in cinema, two black men. We just see pure love, love, grace, forgiveness.
Mr. Lindo, any feedback on, and maybe, or just any comment on Spike's direction of that scene in particular?
Yeah, I didn't do no direction. I just stood back because I'm gonna let you talk there, but I stood back because we talked about this the other day, Delroy, something else. Delroy was in his zone on one side, and Chadwick was on the other side. They're like I'm in the middle. I'm on the 50-yard line. They're on one goal line, and Delroy's on one goal line, Chadwick's on another goal line. And when I see that we're ready, because they're like bulls coming out of the thing you open up. And I don't want to bring them to the set. And this shit wasn't ready. That's it. Sound, are we ready? Camera, Tom, we're ready? Can we go? So we go, Spike. Roll sound, action. I did not bring these two forces together till we were ready. And I was in the middle. I was at the 50-yard line. Looking one way, Delroy's on my left. Chad is over here. And I see they're in the zone. They're in the zone. I love left, right. Down, rolling. Camera, no. Speed, action. And that was it. As my mother would say, I kept my skinny, rusty butt out of the way.
Is there any truth to that, Mr. Lindo?
God, 7,000%. So what you're seeing,
100.
Yeah, what you're seeing and what you're witnessing, the relish that Spike recounts the day that we shot that scene is indicative of, when you speak, Raj, about how did Spike direct it, it was exactly what he said, which was he stayed out of the actor's way because he knew they
were ready,
in tune enough with the circumstances and the people in the circumstances. He was in tune enough to know that the only thing he had to pay attention to was timing. The timing. Do not bring us, and I did not know any of this, but the aspect of not saying the word action until all of the technical components were completely in place and ready to go. And what that's
here, if somebody said, Spike, the sound's not, I would have killed somebody.
And they knew that.
Kill somebody.
And
just like I'll kill somebody if this is not recording right now.
Right. So look, they knew that. Everybody knows that. So meaning everybody knows they gotta be ready. They gotta be ready. And it's not the beautiful thing.
No ifs, ands, or buts.
No ifs, or buts. And the beautiful thing about deconstructing this in the various interviews and conversations we've had, of course, I was not aware of that in the moment. I'm assuming Chadwick was not either. The only thing that we were aware of is whatever my prep was, whatever my preparation was, whatever Chadwick's preparation was, we feel sufficiently confident in Spike in the overall work process that when he says action, we're all of one accord, and we go on to this, and to use a metaphor that I've used before, we get on the train. We get on the train and we go.
Yeah.
So there was, to your question, there was no direction per se. Simply, Spike recognized that we were ready, and therefore nothing could happen until everything else, all the technical components were ready. And he just had to say action when everything was prepared. Yeah. And again, synchronicity, right? Synchronicity. It all came together. Spike, speak about the spiritual aspect. When I say it all came together, speak about how the scene was or was not lit.
Okay.
Because it wasn't lit. You speak on that, Spike.
Okay. And this is something Delroy had told me something I remember. That morning, we shot that scene where Paul is going off in the jungle talking to the camera. I'd forgotten that was the same day. So we shot that. Whoa. And then so we broke for lunch. And Tom Siegel, the great DP, we had not really found a location for this pivotal scene between Paul and Stormer Norman. So we didn't take lunch. We walked around. We finally found it. It was like the base of this, what do you call it?
Waterfall.
Yeah, waterfall. Waterfall. The base of the waterfall that we see early in the film. This we shot with Super 8. And so Tom and I agreed on location. And Tom said, just give me a little minute. So we didn't start right away. We came back for lunch. He said, I want to add smoke, a little bit of smoke to give it some atmosphere. And then he had maybe one still light, a very small still light. So we're getting ready to shoot.
Spike, tell the audience what a fill light is. For those
it's not a main light, just a some flavor, the blessed. Anyway, so this scene we shot before lunch, it begins with Delroy talking to the camera, and he's having a conversation with God, because God woke his black ass up. So he's going back and forth this conversation with God, and then Paul stops, and you see him look. And so I told Tom, when Delroy looks, you got to leave Delroy's face, go up, pan up. This handheld, pan up, go into the trees, above the trees. And when he got there was a heavenly light shining down upon Chadwick. Now, I didn't know this light was there, because when the scene starts, I'm looking in the monitor. I'm behind Tom. I'm looking at the monitor and Delroy. And so once when we called action, that's when Chadwick moved in. Mm-hmm. So I don't have, that day I'd have eyes in the back of my head. That day. So when the camera is coming down, Chadwick is bathed in a godlike glow. And that was not lit, that was God. On my mother's grave, that was God bestowing, a better word than bestow, bathing Chadwick in God's light. And that was that whole scene was spiritual. Go ahead, pick it up, Delroy.
It was God bestowing grace.
Yeah,
it was God bestowing grace on the work process. Mm-hmm. And again, when I've heard Spike speak about that film, I didn't know any of that. I was not aware of any of that. But as we have in service of the talking about the work in the film with various members of the press, I've come to learn this. And what I recognize, I think Spike, we all recognize, is that there were moments in the film where God bestowed grace on the workers.
Yeah.
It was nothing, they were not moments we could have planned for, anticipated. It just happened. And so
That's how it works, right?
that is how it works when it works. So, to the extent that the film has now been released, audiences have responded the way that they've responded. We have talked to the various, individuals about the process and about the work. I can say that, we can say that there were these moments of grace. And again, synchronicity, Raj. Yeah. These moments, and I don't want to sound new agey here, but there were these moments, right. There were these moments of grace that continue, that infuse themselves into the making of the work. And I want to believe continue to be a part of the process as audiences and the various journalists and various people who have seen the work continue to respond to.
Absolutely. And if I could, I know you got to get the question. I don't want to jump in real quick. God does not show up like that if you ain't right. If you ain't, you have to be in a place. You have to be open to as my brother Doris, to God. If you're not open, you're not gonna get God's grace. Yeah. If your mind ain't right, if your soul ain't right, if you ain't right, God ain't gracing you.
Right.
Well, look, I feel like God must have had a hand in how this film landed for us, for the world. It continues to.
Let's give a shout out to Netflix too.
Absolutely. The timing of how this is all rolled out and will continue to roll out. The reason we're talking about it now is because it continues to impact us and will. And I just want to thank you both. I think we're the beneficiaries of having had this conversation after you have had talked about it for several months now, because clearly you have learned new insights about it. And we are so grateful to you both for sharing those with us and for being with us here today.
Thank you. I want to say one last thing.
And I'll go after Delroy.
I could not, Raj, you've used words like Pantheon. You've used like $50 words like Pantheon.
It's MoMA, man. I got to talk big words.
He's right. That's MoMA. That's MoMA.
I will say to you that
Delroy. MoMA, high cotton.
We're in the high cotton. We're in the high cotton, baby.
High cotton.
I'm still wearing jeans under this, so whatever.
You don't know what I have on under this shirt, right? I got this fancy shirt on. But look, to the extent that the response to the film and the response to my contribution to the film has been what it has been, I take it 3,000%. I receive it, and I receive it very gratefully. However, and I worked for it. However, I was also part of the team. Clark Peters, Norm Lewis, Isaiah Whitlock Jr., Jonathan Majors, in addition to Spike, the crew, and Chadwick. So I just feel I'd be remiss.
Thank you very much.
If I did not just say that and mention them and bring them to this space along with Spike and I.
100%.
And ended up, I know we got to go. I would just like to thank Delroy, everybody in front of and behind the camera. Also, I'd like to thank those brothers who are no longer with us, those brothers who made out of Vietnam.
Amen.
It's been very, very impacting for me.
Amen.
To see the response before the film was even done. We had 5 screenings for Black and brown Vietnam vets here in the metro area, and that was I mean, these guys were 8, 16, 17, 18 years old, shipped halfway around the world. By the grace of God, they're here with us now. And they truly love the film. So,
Amen.
Yeah, amen. The vets. Amen to the vets. That's right.
the vets.
Thank you, gentlemen. Stay safe. And again, congratulations on a truly remarkable work. Thank you very
God
much.
bless you. Thank you so much. Spike, we'll talk soon, buddy.
Yo, yo, yo.